everyone, this is Yvonne from Yvonne Ceramics. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make glaze and then glaze fire ceramic beads like these ones here. This is a very small, don't know if you can see, a very small round ceramic beads glazed with Amaco Celadon glazes. So don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel for more videos each week. To start off, let's talk about clay. So you can use any kind of clay for the beads. I am using a white stoneware clay, and this is just scrap clay from my leftover projects. So I'm going to just roll it into a coil first. When you are rolling into a coil, you want to make sure the coil is uniform in shape. So I am rolling from my tip of the fingers all the way to the end of my palm, and I'm rolling with even pressure. And sometimes when you are rolling a coil, it could become flat and not round shape. You can just tap it to make sure it's back into the round coil and then keep rolling. So I finished rolling my coil. My coil is about 1.5 centimeters tall, and so I want to make sure my beads are uniform in size. So I'm going to use my ruler to help me. I'm going to start with cutting off the ends. Okay, and then I'm going to cut in my coil. I'm going to cut about, let's try with 1 centimeter first and see. So today I'm going to demonstrate just a round bead. After making the round beads, you can make other shapes of beads as well. So after cutting my 1 centimeter of clay, I'm going to roll it into a ball. Just like that. And if your clay is a little bit dry like mine, what I do is I'm gonna wet my hand a little bit and then roll my clay. I don't want to dunk my clay into the water because then it'll be too wet. So that way my clay is getting the moisture it needs. Of course, if you're using fresh clay, then you won't have this issue. Okay, so my clay is pretty round. It's okay if it's not perfectly round because this is handmade ceramic bead. Okay, so that's my first ball of bead, and then we need to punch a hole for the bead. When I'm punching hole, I want to think about firing as well because my clay will shrink about 12%. So I want to make sure that it can go into my bead rod. So let's take a look here. So this is my bead firing apparatus. What I'll do in glaze firing is I have my firing rod and the bead's going to sit right here on the rod. And so I want to make sure that the bead, after all the shrinkage, it can still fit into this rod. And so I have my hole puncher here. This is the Camper hole cutter, 3/16 of an inch. And so when I'm measuring, this rod fits perfectly into my hole cutter with lots of room to move. So that would be perfect for me. So I'm using this hole cutter to cut a hole in my clay bead. So kind of in the center here, and just cut my hole like that. Okay, after cutting my hole, it looks really clean on this side, but on this side is not very clean, so I'm going to use my knife to clean that up. And then you can just use a small paintbrush with a little bit of water to clean up the edge here. And you can use a needle tool to fix the edge. Okay, so that's my first bead. Let's try the hole here. Okay, it fits. Even though it looks like there's lots of room right now to wiggle, but then after all the shrinkage, I think it would fit really well. Okay, so that's just a normal, really simple round bead. I'm going to put that aside. And because I want to make all uniform shapes, next I'm going to use my ruler again, and I'm going to cut 1 centimeter and keep going like that, so that all my bead will be somewhat uniform in shape and size. And other than round shape, you can also make like long rectangular shape. So instead of cutting 1, you can do a 2 centimeter long bead. And for a long bead, what you could do is just roll it into a ball like so, and then roll it between your thumb into a nice long bead. And when you're rolling, you want to make sure that there's enough room for you to cut your hole on each end. Okay, that looks pretty good. So that's my long bead, and I'm going to do the same thing and cut a hole in the middle. And this time you have to be careful not to cut through to the side of the bead. Just like that. And then we're going to clean up on the edge here. And I'm just going to use some water and my paintbrush to clean up this edge. And so this is my long bead compared to my round bead. You can also add texture to your bead. There are lots of texture tools. You can use a carving tool, or you can use a dotting tool to add dots to the bead. If you have textured mat, you can roll your bead on the texture mat to get texture. But since I don't have textured mat, I just have a texture roller. I'm going to try to lightly roll my texture roller on the bead. Doesn't quite work as well. I can also use my dotting tool to create dots. Like that. Creating dots. So after glazing, you can use glazes like Celadon glaze or any of the texture glaze, like texture turquoise glaze, to create interesting effect on the beads. That's one. So I just want to show you quickly all the beads I made. So I made about 21 round beads and 2 longer round beads here in 1 hour. So it doesn't take that long to make beads. You just need to make them into balls and then poke the holes. So now they are done, I'm going to let them dry and then put them into bisque firing. So my beads have finished bisque firing. They're definitely smaller than when I made them, but that's okay. Let's do some tests. So this is my high fire rod. When I fire them with glazes, I'm going to string it on the rod like that. So it's good that it still fits in the rod. And then I'm going to have them sitting on my bead rack like this. So let's glaze them. And because I don't want to get glaze on my firing rod, I have a different wire here. So this is just a non-fire wire, just any kind of wire you get from Home Depot or home hardware stores. What I'll be doing is I'm gonna string them into my wire like that. And then I'm going to just use my bead rack to help me with glaze. I'm gonna glaze them with blue, so I'm using Amaco Sky glazes. I will be using a paintbrush like this, dip them in my glaze, and then just kind of glaze them like that. If you have dipping glaze, it will be even better. You can just dip this whole thing into your glaze, but I don't have any dipping glazes, so I'm just going to brush them like that. Or you could also just hold them on between your fingers and glaze them like that too. Whatever works for you. And after you finish glazing, you can just put them to dry. So my beads have already been glazed and dried. I put on 2 coats, brushed them on 2 coats. You can see the inside, it is unglazed, it's still white, which is what I want, because when I put them on my rod, I want them to be unglazed so that the glaze doesn't fuse onto my rod. So when I put them into my kiln, I want to position it like this with some space, and then I will be putting my beads in. I can't put too many in because I can't have them touching each other. So let's take a look. So let's see. So I can probably only do 4 beads per rod, 4 to 5 beads. Can probably fit 1 more in like that. Yeah, so something like that, 5 beads per rod. And you want to make sure that they're not touching each other, because once they finish glaze firing, if they're touching each other like that, they'll be fused together and it's really hard to take them apart. So when you're loading, you need to do a final check. And I've got a few more rods that I'm going to place in here, and I'm going to put them with beads. So I've just finished glaze firing, and I just want to show you my setup inside the kiln. Here is the bead rod, and then also I've got some little beads that I hung on bead rod, kind of like a makeshift bead rod here with the kiln posts. Let me zoom in for you guys to see. Let me just take out these kiln posts. So here is, I'm just resting the rod on top of 2 kiln posts, and on top of that I just put extra kiln posts to just stable it so that it doesn't roll around. And I only put 2 beads on this rod because these are bigger beads and I don't want it to slump because of the weight and the size of the beads. So these turned out really nice. And let's take a look at the other one. So this one is another pendant that I made using a high fire wire as a loop, and same as this one here, fire on a high temperature rod. Let's look at our round beads. So the rod is just sitting here on the bead rack, and I have 5 beads on each rod. They all came out nicely. It didn't stick to the rod because I didn't glaze the inside of the hole, so they all turned out very nicely.